from the studio. We don't normally do Koviki
It's
talk here in the
special
studio.
because we have these special ladies on.
We have special ladies on, so we had to come to the studio so we could have absolutely our best foot forward.
Yeah.
So, Koviki Talk, for those of you that live under a rock and aren't aware of this award-winning show, actually, that's true. We usually just say we're award-winning when we weren't, but we did win an award.
Yeah, look at that.
Koviki Talk is the multi-episode series where we talk about all things COVID-19.
Yep.
We're a year and 9 months into this thing at this point.
Yeah, a long time.
So we've gone through a lot of different things. We've gone through the census. We've gone through registering to vote. We've gone through actually voting, getting to the polls safely during a pandemic, getting tested during a pandemic, doing all those kind of things. Right now, it's all about the vaccine, and it's about the new different variants as they come forward. But really, what we do here is we talk about COVID-19, but it's created by Pacific Islanders. We have nothing but Pacific Islander guests. Today is no different, and we talk to the Pacific Islander community about all things COVID-19. So it's a great way to end a Monday, especially a Labor Day Monday. Right? We got some special people to share their Labor Day with us today. So you want to introduce our first amazing person?
Yes, our first amazing person is Fatima. She's a San Francisco native, born and raised. She's a doula, an inspiring midwife, and a new mom. Congratulations. She's inspired by her Fijian and Black culture, aiming to reclaim the narrative of Indigenous practice in today's society. She recently was a part of M.AN.A. Pacifica's first community breastfeeding event. Fatih is also fluent in Mandarin, Chinese, and Hindi. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
She also loves to get down in the kitchen. Welcome, Fatima.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I get down in the dining room or in the living room. I don't do much in the kitchen, but I eat good. So our next amazing guest is Ruta Lauleva Luaiufi Iono. She's a traditional birth attendant from the village of Fasitouta and Marley and from so-called San Francisco. She currently works as a doula coordinator for M.AN.A. Pacifica, the Pacific Islander branch of the sister web community Doula Network, which provides cultural and linguistically congruent doula care to families birthing in San Francisco. In her role at M.ANA Pacifica, or M.ANA, maintaining ancestral knowledge and autonomy, as well as in every other aspect of her career, Ruta Lauleva is focused on healing the current and generational effects of colonization within the mind, body, spirit of our people, and she gives thanks to her ancestors and to the families who have called her to serve in this capacity. Welcome, Ruta.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us today.
Yeah, I thank Naki for giving me those linguistically congruent. She saw these words and she knew that I was going to have problems with them. She gave them to me.
I was like, oh, my asthma is bad. You go.
Naki sorts through the bios before, and then she farms it out. You'll do this one, and I'll do that one.
Yeah.
What a great way to end our Labor Day.
Yes.
Is with learning about doulas and learning about the role that they're playing in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And she's on a run of really good icebreaker questions, and she didn't even give you a heads up. Sometimes I'll just let you know. Sometimes on the pre-show, she'll actually give the guests a heads up and give them the question. And I noticed she didn't do that today.
I forgot. So I'll give you a second because then I'll go to Carl first because he didn't even get the question.
Great. Yeah, it was funny until just now.
Yeah. If you can choose any two famous people to have dinner with, who would it be and why? Or even one famous person, dead or alive.
Oh, there's two famous people.
Yeah, one or two, and it could be any famous person.
If I was being a brat, I would pick two famous people who didn't get along just so I could watch them not get along.
Wow.
I would pick probably Gandhi. I think that he got so much done in his own way.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't, warfare and those kind of things. He was able to, over a long period of time, get things done in his own way. So, yeah, I think I picked Gandhi.
Awesome. Let's go with Fatima.
Oh, okay. On the spot. I think when I was younger, I always wanted to meet Martin Luther King Jr. and just have
Mm.
a conversation and like growing. Like I just remember um, always being excited to know how he really felt about things. And then I'd also like to meet Rihanna and how she became
Mm.
a billionaire. I talked to her about that. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's funny you say Rihanna because that is Carl's crush thing. That is his boo thing.
I wish you could see. We have a giant poster of Rihanna on my refrigerator at the house right now, Carl. We'll have to have you over.
I'm a
for
huge
dinner.
Riri fan.
He loves
Um,
Riri.
Actually, so in 2009, I stopped lifting weights heavy. Like for all, and the only thing I went to the gym for years was just to lift heavy. And in 2009, I realized that I was older, my joints weren't holding up to the heavy lifting, and I really got away from weights. And I started on this running kick where I was running on the treadmill a lot. I was actually running on the outside on the track, and I was looking for music that was just that I could run to. And like every Rihanna song that came out in like between 2008 and 2011 was just perfect music to run to. And then after that, it was like, I don't like it just to run to. I actually like her as an artist and I'm stuck with it. But yeah, I'm a Rihanna fan.
Do you identify as part of the Navy?
What's that?
Do you identify as part of the Navy, which is the like?
Yes. I can get down with that.
What about you, Ruta?
Well, okay, so my immediate response was also Rihanna. Rihanna and Cleopatra were my two off the top responses. But then when I was thinking about it, I was like, I'm holding out to meet Riri in real life because,
It will happen.
She's going to have a baby sometime and she's going to need a doula. So just putting it out there in the universe. So yeah, I think I'd stay with Cleopatra and then Nafanua for sure.
Oh, yeah. Those are good ones.
Nice.
That's a good one. I like that.
I dropped the Queen Liliuokalani when you'd asked this question a few shows ago. But
Yeah.
Nafanua,
That's a good one.
making me think. I love it.
I like that one. I like that one.
Who would you pick next?
Man, I don't know. Bob Marley for sure. He's
still thinking about that herb.
Yeah, well, yeah, but just because of his songs and how the words still stand and hold today. So I would like to ask him about why you wrote these words and what inspired you. Just like the same questions I would ask everyone: what inspired you? Why did you write these words? That's still like Tupac and Tupac too, because I still think the lyrics that they wrote still are standing today. You know what I mean? So that I would like to. And then I want to ask him, why so many baby mamas? Why so many baby mamas? But yeah, I think those two would be it. Like Bob Marley and Tupac.
Bob Marley is, so you get a lot of commercialization, right? So like when I think of certain songs, they bring me back to a certain time.
Yes.
Like that was released here and it got overplayed and so it brings you back to, that year the song was out. The thing that I love about Bob Marley is it wasn't necessarily over commercialized at any point. So it could be, it doesn't have to recall a certain time like when the music was released. It's more, I guess when Legend came out that he became, really big at that point, but there's not like a certain time that when you hear it, you think of, oh, this is 88 or this is 95 or something like that. Of course, our guests wouldn't know anything about 88. They're
they're babies. They're babies. Beautiful babies. So Ruta, that was our question. Yay. Tell us about M.AN.A and why and how it started.
So M.AN.A Pacifica is the Pacific Islander cohort of the Sister Web San Francisco Community Doula Network, which currently serves the Pacific Islander community with M.ANA Pacifica, the Black community in San Francisco with Kindred Birth Companions, and the Spanish-speaking community with Semilla Sagrada, which means sacred seed.
Nice.
And so the initiative for this started with our executive director, Marna Armstead, and she basically, she had a not so positive pregnancy experience, right? She was not being very well supported by her doctors, and she just could see how having another support person in her life really would have impacted her. And so she originally started the program, and when she started the program, it kind of coincided when this information was coming out about adverse birth outcomes in the Pacific Islander community, because a couple years ago, I guess it's almost like 4 years ago at this point, UCSF did a study that disaggregated the data for Pacific Islanders from the
I
Asian
love that.
right? And so previous to that study, it looked like when you looked at the API preterm birth rates, right? Preterm birth meaning somebody who is born, or a baby that is born before, I believe it's before 37 weeks, right?
Oh, wow.
And preterm birth is really associated with stress, right? Because when the body is stressed, it is not able to hold the pregnancy as long as all the way to term. And so previous to the study, it looked like our rates, I think it was like 8.7%, right? And it was very close to being on the same rates with white folks. When they disaggregated the data and pulled the Pacific Islander data out, the number for Pacific Islanders shot up to 10%. Right, which for the city of San Francisco was only second to the preterm birth rates for Black folks birthing in San Francisco.
Wow.
And so, the Black maternal health crisis is pretty well known in this country at this point, because there's been so much mobilization and work by the Black community, Black women, Black mothers, to bring awareness to this. And so to see that the numbers were so high for our community really mobilized some people in San Francisco, and that was the inception of wanting to put together a Pacific Islander program in the city.
That's awesome. I love that they disaggregated the numbers, because it seems like in order for us to be seen, we have to do that. We have to go into the city. We have to go into the county. We have to go into the state just to be seen. When we know we're here, but like data is everything. How crazy is that?
Yeah, it's interesting how many different things matter in disaggregating data. You know what I mean? Like I never thought about it, really at length until the pandemic. And we started disaggregating numbers for the pandemic. And then the more we dig into it, the more we find out we need our own numbers, and it doesn't matter for what. If there's numbers out there, we need our own numbers. Yeah. So I'm a guy, so I need to educate myself with this. And I just do dumb math, right? 4 weeks in a month times 9 times 4, 36. Is a full term pregnancy 38 weeks? Is it 36 weeks? What is a full term pregnancy?
So full term is considered 40 weeks.
40 weeks. Okay.
But there is a thing that happens in the development of a baby. It's weird that we say 9 months, because it's actually 40 weeks is always what you hear, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And 40 weeks is 10 months. Right. So I'm not really sure what that 9-month thing comes from. But when the baby is developing, basically what makes them able to really like survive on their own outside of the mother is that their lungs develop to a certain point where they have this coating on the inside, to where when they breathe, the lung won't collapse right away. Right. And so that happens around 36, 37 weeks.
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard the 40. Like, I'm a father of triplets, and the big line was to get past 30 weeks for safety. Then it was 32, and we got to 35 weeks, 5 days, and then I couldn't remember like what was because anything after 32, they were just like, you guys are like, this is great, this is perfect. Wherever we end up, we're happy with it. After 32, we stopped really trying to shoot for certain numbers. But then after that, I was like, well, what is a full term? Because I've always heard the 9-month thing.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of a misnomer, right? It's not a 9-month gestation. It's not a 9-month pregnancy period. It's 40 weeks. Let's see. I have so many questions to ask. I'm going to back up and let Mackie run, because I got to educate myself today.
Okay, so a lot of people think midwives and doulas are the same thing. Can you help distinguish? Is there a difference, and what people are getting mixed up?
That's good. Yeah, I could answer that question. To be honest, I think a really quick way is that doulas coach and then midwives catch the babies. I also know that midwives go through extra certification if they want to be a hospital midwife or a home birth midwife. So there's two different types. There's two different types, yeah. And doulas are they get training. They don't really need to be certified. You can get certified and get your training done. And doulas provide this holistic type of care that's really, we care about the mom the most, and we want to make sure that she is getting all of her needs met that she wants, and we are there for her. Midwives, if they're working in the hospital, they have to follow medical guidelines, and they can prescribe medication. They can also, check your check the female body parts and give information. That's more, it's more like in that fits their guidelines, I would say. Yeah, but a doula is really there to provide care for the mom and support the mom and make sure that she's well informed and can advocate for herself. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's important. I'm so glad that happens, though, the support for the mothers, because everybody, like the doctors and the nurses, everyone is, their focus is the baby, of course, the mom too. But I'm thinking that, the mother has, is going through hormonal changes. And, sometimes, postpartum, there's a lot of, I don't know, sadness and crying. I know after I had my kids that I cried for like a week straight and I didn't even know what it was. I was just like, I'm so sad. And it wasn't until, I had to read up on it or talk to other mothers and they were like, that's postpartum. You're going through your hormones are trying to get back to what they were. So I love that you're providing this a service or educating them on how to help the mother, right?
Is do you talk about postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis as part of the process so that they're prepared? Because I would think that going through things and understanding that, hey, this is normal. Like this is, you're not like the only person that's ever happened
Right.
to. You don't have to think that there's something wrong with me because I'm feeling this way. Is that something that's gone through either in the doula process?
Yeah, 1,000%. We definitely talked to them about that. And you honestly, Carl, hit it right on the head too, of like what we do as doulas is just to help people be like, this is normal. You feel terrible, you feel nauseous, you feel really sad after the baby came. The contractions are really intense. This is all normal, right? And that kind of helps people flow with it. But yeah, for sure, we talk about it, and I'm finding more and more that we need to. It honestly is a conversation we need to have more in our community, because we have really high rates of depression with like across the board in the NHP community. But then there's not numbers in the United States for islanders, right? But when I was looking at the data for New Zealand, I refer to the New Zealand data a lot because they're actually counting our folks and really invested in that. But in New Zealand, NHPI people have some of the highest rates of perinatal depression. So not just postpartum, but also depression during pregnancy, right? So yeah, I think it's something we need to talk about a lot more, for sure.
Yeah, it seems like that would make sense that if you are, especially in the US, right, if you're more likely to live in or near the poverty line, if you're more likely to have a hard time accessing healthcare, if you're more likely to, there's all these things that Pacific Islanders are more likely to be experiencing. And then lay on top of that a pregnancy, like only seems like the math would add up that yes, you're more likely to have bouts with depression and more severe bouts than other people who don't have all the other layers of adversity laid on top of it.
Yeah. And it's been occurring to me a lot too, like, as Indigenous people, we are living in diaspora. Like, we didn't get forcibly brought over here, but we are separate from land. We're separate from our ancestors where they're at. It's only a couple generations back that we were living a drastically different lifestyle. And so for me, I would think about it like it makes sense that we have a lot of mental health stuff because we aren't totally acclimated to this lifestyle and this climate, but we still have to stay on that grind and keep producing. And so I really think that's a big part of it.
I think and when I say naive, I don't mean from a psychological or intelligence standpoint. When you think about being naive to European diseases and European viruses and those kind of things, when you look at the way that we fared with COVID-19, I think, and we're only several generations away from being, fully living in a self-sustaining community, a self-sustaining environment, that we're probably not as equipped as other ethnicities to deal with these kind of viruses because we haven't, it's a good point. We're just a couple generations out from a completely different way of living.
Yeah, we have Mona who's checking in on Facebook who says, reminds me of the difference between a peer supporter and a psychiatrist. And she writes support, which is awesome. During this pandemic and this past year and way past a year, have you seen COVID-19 impact the work that you've been doing? And has it changed a lot of the way that you are helping mothers?
So I'll respond from the doula side, and then I'd love for Fati, because Fati was Fati is a doula and future midwife in her own right, but she also worked with M.AN.A as one of our moms. And so I'll answer from the doula side, and then Fati, you can talk about the experience, because it's changed a lot, right?
Yeah.
For us as doulas, like there were a couple of months last year where we weren't allowed in the hospitals with our clients.
Oh my God.
So our folks just had to go in by themselves, right? And then it slowly shifted to you can have it kind of has gone back and forth, and it's dependent on the hospital. But now, especially because we have the organization of Sister Web behind us, we can actually go in. But for a while, people were having to choose between, do I have my doula there or do I have my partner, right? And that was really hard. And then also we've switched to a lot of Zoom meetings. So instead of having prenatals and postpartum visits, we do a lot more phone calls. We do a lot of checking in on Zoom. And honestly, it's been really challenging because our people, like, we are so relationship oriented.
Yeah.
And so to be like, yeah, okay, we're going to get on a Zoom call, it feels so like cold and clinical in a certain way.
Not personable.
And part of being a doula is that we can actually offer that soft touch, that loving care and presence. And so it felt terrible to be like, okay, we're just back to, I'm going to set up a Zoom call. And then again, and for our community too, it's hard to, it just feels different, right? I found that it was really hard for a lot of our clients to be able to make their Zoom appointments because maybe there's like kids in the background or family in the background, or, it was a lot. So I feel like we've had to be creative in figuring out how to be able to continue to provide that good care. And, on the doula side, like we both had to get tested before we could come and be in this space, right? So that we could like be here, no masks, whatever. And then on my side, like for the doulas now to go into the hospital, there hasn't been a vaccine mandate for doulas. So Sister Web isn't mandating that the doulas get vaccinated. But for all of the hospitals, any support person, including family members, you either have to be have a vaccine or be tested, have a 72-hour test, right? And so for me, even like I'm making a conscious choice to not disclose my vaccine status of whether I am or not, because there's been so much backlash for our families that haven't been vaccinated, like pushback from the hospitals, judgment, maltreatment in the hospitals based on their vaccine status. So like, I'm just standing in solidarity with them about that. And either way, like, I'm really encouraging folks who are vaccinated to get tested consistently, especially if we're in the hospital spaces, right? And so for me to constantly know my vaccine, or not my vaccine status, my COVID status, When I'm close to a birth, I'm getting tested every 2 or 3 days just to be sure, because especially with the Delta variant out and like people getting it from weird places again and not necessarily being able to contact trace, I'm getting tested all the time. So it's become a lot more complex. Whereas before I could pull up with some food, we'd kick it on the couch and have this kind of appointment. Now it's like it's more abstract.
I think that's one of the things that COVID definitely did is before COVID, if you were on a conference call and there was a dog barking or there's a kid in the background, it was like, oh my gosh, there's, what is going on? And now people are so relaxed at like, it's okay if there's noises in the background.
Mm.
And I think that COVID and Zoom and Teams and all these things have kind of let us loosen it up a little bit to some of the calls. And especially in a PI, you're likely to see family in a PI Zoom call. More often than not, you're going to see a kid go through the background or you're going to see somebody come in. So I think that's something that we've loosened up a little bit with the formality. Fatima, how about you? How has it changed? How has COVID-19 changed the way that you're providing services?
Well, just as a new mom and getting pregnant during the pandemic, it was really hard and it was very lonely. And I wanted and really wished to get this type of care that was close, just like how me and Ruta are sitting here right now. But I couldn't have that. It was just on the screens, and that kind of made the connection go down. And one thing that was really hard was being a mom in the hospitals. I couldn't bring my partner with me to even just like the ultrasound checks. I was really lucky enough to ask my ultrasound tech. I was like, please, can I FaceTime my husband so he can see, what the gender reveal is of our baby. And so it's just I think the pandemic has taken away a lot of the one-on-one connections and the touch and the massage that the pregnant moms really need. And Ruta was my doula, and over the Zooms, it was really funny because I had a lot of lower back pain. And so she was showing me how to use the faja. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the faja wrap, which like helps support your pelvic, like hips and whatnot. And I wish Ruta was there to actually put it on me. I was having trouble by myself. And that was one of the support that I really wanted, to get. There was a lot of other things that I think make providing doula care during a pandemic difficult for pregnant moms.
Yeah.
And I think just because it's a new thing, now doulas are learning how to navigate that, how to navigate Zoom, how to, like you said, people are now feeling more comfortable. So we're also learning how to get more comfortable talking with clients about how to, take care of their bodies on their own, or if we can't be there for them at that point.
Yeah, I think in person is so important. But I still love that Zoom. Like people get on Zoom just because they need the support any way they can get it. But I totally agree that the in person, especially a mother going through so many changes, the in person, like Ruta could have helped you put that on, and maybe and then you would have felt confident that you had it on right. But just not that we're touchy feely people, right? Especially when you're having a baby, my daughter-in-law is pregnant. And so we're always touching her stomach, which I've learned to, can I touch your stomach? Because when I was pregnant and I would go somewhere, people I didn't even know would just reach out trying to touch I'm like, whoa, so yes, I'm like, hey, whoa. So I've learned that you have to ask, do you mind if I touch your stomach? Give me that baby.
As you're reaching.
Give me that baby. But yeah, I'm with you with the, we need to be in person and hopefully this pandemic goes away soon, hopefully, so that the mothers can get the physical help, because it's important too for their mental, I believe, at least for their mental well-being.
I think that's a big piece of the culture is right. Hands-on,
Yeah.
touching, massage, all those
Yes.
things that you wouldn't think of until you can't do it, right?
Yeah.
Like simple things like you had said, go to the hospital with
Right.
your loved one. Like that's just not something that you can do in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
I had to my wife had surgery last week and I had to have a test within 72 hours and I had, like to just go in to the building with her.
Yeah.
So those are things that I think that, as PIs, we didn't really think of until, you and I had talked about that on the show. Like, what do you mean you drop them off at the ER and you can't go in? Like, I don't even understand what does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
and then when do they let you in? They don't let you in.
Yeah.
And, those are pieces of the pandemic that hopefully we get to the point now where we can get past it. We can do all the right things and go back to, being able to put our hands on people and be, supportive in person. Where do you see, even with the pandemic, it seems like there is just this, and it maybe it's because we have so many guests on that are advanced and forward in mental health and in the birth process. All these kind of things didn't seem like they were as big a deal 3 to 5 years ago, and it just seems to be expanding exponentially. Is that something that maybe Naki and I see, and it's not getting to be a bigger deal and more accepting, or do you all see this this awareness growing in our community?
I'll be honest, it's been challenging in the Bay Area. It's been challenging for sure. And I'm constantly trying to figure out I even think that the concept of doula is challenging because the concept of doula is not an indigenous concept to us, right? But the act of being a doula is, right? A doula is, like we like to say in M.AN.A, a doula is your new best friend, your auntie, your sister, your mom. It's just that person who, if we were in the village lifestyle, would be the person that's like, yeah, I've seen births. I'm not necessarily going to be your midwife. I'm not doing the full fall on your stomach. I'm not catching the baby, right?
Right. But
I am going to be here with you and normalizing the process and giving you physical support, emotional support, educational support along the way. And so it's so hard because it's like, it's something that's ours, but the word doula actually comes from a Greek word for female servant or slave, right? And so it's honestly a word that a lot of doulas we don't even like using. So that's why I'm like, I identify as a traditional birth attendant, right? Like I'm going to pull up, I'm going to support you at the birth. So it's hard because it's like a lot of these more holistic health things. I think a lot of folks in our community see them as something that's for white people, right? Where it's like, oh, natural birth, whatever, natural healing, organic food, all this stuff. But like we talked about a couple generations back, we didn't have organic food, but everyone was just eating what we grew. It was as organic as it could be.
And we've been doing this for centuries.
Exactly.
We've been birthing our own kids with no doctor or no nurse, with our midwives or you know what I mean, with our mother or the lady that did fulfill, you know what I mean? My mother-in-law did that. She did holistic healing and medicine, and just everything was plant-based. So it's funny that now we come to America and we're like, oh no, that's white medicine. No, we've been doing this for centuries. It's just a little different.
And that could be part of it, is that because now you're putting a name to the process, people start saying, oh, well, that's not, that doesn't need to be a thing.
Right.
But it's just describing activities that we already were doing and putting a name to it.
Right.
That reminds me of when my wife was pregnant, the team that we were seeing, there was 5 doctors that we were seeing because it was multiples. And they were talking about a Samoan lady that came in and they gave her due date and said, this is the due date that we want, we're shooting for. Well, there's all these checkups that go in between that and the date. And she really understands the whole, that there's a bunch of checkups. She left, didn't come back until the day that they were due, walked in, had babies, and left the next day, and had car seats and left the next day. Her family was there.
Wow.
And, they were talking about how that was just the they gave her the date, and she was like, okay, well, if that's what I'm supposed to do, then I'll come back in. And it was like Western medicine, maybe like 10% of Western medicine was used, during her whole pregnancy, because she didn't really understand, all the help that she could have had. But she showed up with, they said the whole family was there, and they came for the day, had the kids, and left the next day, and were out. But yeah, I think there is that thing in society now. If you put a name to a process, the process is fine and it doesn't bug people. But if you put a name to it, now these activities are called doula, or they're called something else.
Right.
Then you get the pushback of, why do we have to name it? What's the word mean? And all those things. So um yeah, like I said, maybe it's just we were thinking that it was becoming more open and more receptive to it, but I can see where you're on the front lines with it.
Yeah, and honestly, it seems a little bit geographical to me because I just saw that up in Washington, they graduated a whole cohort of Pacific Islander doulas, right?
Nice.
And here it was a little bit more challenging. Right now, Fati is actually part of a doula training that's being put on by one of our sister organizations, Expecting Justice. That's for Black and Pacific Islander folks.
Nice.
It was a little bit challenging to find the Pacific Islanders to pull up into that space, right?
Wow.
And then in Hawaii, there's more of a movement. But then to me, I'm like, okay, but on Hawaii, the Kanaka there are on their land. And so there's like a little bit of a different relationship to our traditional ways of doing stuff.
Right.
And in New Zealand, there's actually a really strong movement of midwifery. And there's these beautiful Maori birthing centers where Maori families come, they learn together in a group how to do traditional baby care, traditional birth preparation. And so I think that there's, just to be honest, I feel like there's a lot of disenfranchisement in the Bay Area, especially, right? Because our folks are actively being pushed out of the places where we traditionally have been. Right now in San Francisco, there's only, I think, like 40, around on average 40 Pacific Islander babies born in the city every year.
Wow.
And we know that our folks are getting pushed out of the city.
Exactly.
And so it's like, I think it's geographic. It's also like just the social, setting that we're in too, if folks are open to it. But people are open to it when they understand it more.
Right.
But I think that, to be honest, a lot of our folks are sometimes in survival mode, to be totally frank. And when we're in survival mode, it's kind of hard to integrate not only new information, but then also change patterns. And then to be like, wait, there's that thing too of like, okay, like you said, Naki, your mom was like all holistic, all plant-based stuff. And then our folks come here and we get shamed for doing that stuff. Right. And then in 2 generations, the kids are back to being like, no, we're pro-organic stuff. And it's like, it's a lot of cognitive like dissonance, and it's very stressful. So it's like, we just learned how to assimilate, and now we're being told that the assimilated way is harmful to us. Right. And it's like, it's so much, It's
a lot. And plus, I think in New Zealand, there's a lot of, still the culture is, and I'm guessing, I don't even know because I'd love to go there, but I'm guessing that in New Zealand, the culture is still in place in the home, as like I find here, in my opinion, that in San Francisco and the Bay Area, that our culture is a little less taught maybe, and just because of, we're in America, right? We're doing their rules, going to the hospital because that's what we were taught. Whenever we're sick, just go to the hospital and take whatever they give us. Where I've learned, like within, just because of all the illnesses that I've had, that it's not always the medicine that the doctor prescribes is the best thing for you. And I love that one of my daughters got sick and I took them to the hospital. I'm like, oh, we're just going to get them cough syrup. And he's like, no, just get honey, natural honey, and have her take a teaspoon of that every day. And her cough went away right away, went away. And so I I love that is still that I can find a doctor that is thinking of natural ways to heal instead of always going to the quick fix is, I guess, the quick fix. But my mother-in-law used a lot of aloe and tea leaves. And, sometimes we're lazy, right? We don't want to go look for it. So we'll just take the cough medicine. You know what I mean? But now I think more now people are starting to go back to the natural herbs and and all the crazy stuff that are in our food now, So I think you're right about the where we're at. Like in San Francisco, it's the city, and then in the islands, like in Hawaii, they have their own land, So the mindset is different compared to here.
I think it's harder. Yeah, it is harder because there was a generation or two that our family was Gramps. You were telling me was saying you speak English.
Yeah.
And there was a big push to assimilate. Like there was some of the elders were like, no, you're in America, then you need to figure out how to live this way. And some of the culture may have been lost with that. Now to Ruta's point, now we're saying, wait, let's go back. Let's go back and take a look at those practices and see what makes sense and what doesn't. I was curious with Fatih. Have you been able to, being fluent in Mandarin and Hindi, have you been able to provide services and use the language? Because I would think that would be very comforting to the person that you're able to work with, to not have to go through what they're going through and overcome a language barrier.
Yeah. Thank you. I grew up learning both Mandarin and Chinese. I went to a Chinese immersion school, and I haven't had any clients so far that speak Mandarin or Hindi that I've had the opportunity to talk to them in their native language and communicate. I hope I can get some clients and some moms who, would want to come and take my services.
I'm sure that'll happen. I'm sure that'll happen. I can see you lighting up talking about it. So I'm sure that it will happen. And like I said, that's going to be a big piece to somebody that's not going to have to, find somebody not only that's knowledgeable, but then have to overcome the language barrier. So they're trying to get help and they're trying to get support, and then they're trying to understand the instructions and the language and those kind of things. That's going to play. I can tell when I ask that, I saw you light up. So I'm sure that's going to happen for you.
Yes, I hope so.
Is the so in the Bay Area, the PI doula program, or M.AN.A, is it just, are you the only PI program, or are there other ones in the US?
We're the only PI program in the Bay Area.
Wow.
There's the class that just graduated up in Washington. I forget. I wish I could remember what they're called, but they're one of the bigger like PI organizations up there. Nice. And then in Hawaii, there is Kalau Okekahuli, which is they're Kanaka Hawaiian folks, and they provide specific care that is, indigenous Hawaiian practices, but they also provide care to Pacific Islanders. And were you on that Zoom call? We did a Zoom call with them last year when we were planning the breastfeeding event. But they're amazing, and they they form their nonprofit. They're getting some of their funding from the government of Hawaii, right? Because they can see how much that kind of care is supportive. And then down in PI specific, there's not really, but down in Long Beach, there's Stevie Marino, who's Chamorro and Puerto Rican, I believe. And she runs, I think it's called like Birth Workers of Color training. So she's PI, but the program itself isn't PI specific. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. It feels like it's growing as we start. And I think this is an important conversation, and you guys should be everywhere having this conversation, because the more we talk about it, the more that it'll normalize in our community. So I love the work that you guys are doing. Is there classes every other? When is the next class, and do you run them at a certain time of the year?
So the events are kind of one-off. Right now, M.AN.A is really small. So M.AN.A at this current moment is just me. I use the pronoun because I'm like, it's honestly all of us, and it's all of the
Yeah.
investors that are like, do the birth work, do the birth work.
Yes.
But the events happen when we can organize them. There's also a San Francisco Pacific Islander Maternal Advisory Board. It's a mouthful, but we call it the MAB for short.
Nice.
So when we're able to get some funding too, I think either this month or next month, we're going to put on a nutrition and pregnancy event. But, you know, it's like, it's the nonprofit life. It's all about where we can get the funding to do stuff and where we can get time to do stuff. But M.AN.A Pacifica does currently offer, and this is for everyone birthing, you know, anyone, any Pacific Islander, anywhere. We've had international folks call in, but the first Thursday of every month is a prenatal support group that people can call in. It's on Zoom. And then the third Thursday of every month is a postpartum support circle. And so those are ongoing groups that we offer.
That's awesome. Mona, who is checking in from American Samoa, she was asking about, is it funded by Medicaid and is it expensive?
Kind of depends. So I actually have a private client. So I see private clients outside of M.AN.A right now who just asked me for an invoice because I guess her healthcare does cover some doula stuff. And so there are pushes trying to be made in legislation for doula care to be able to be funded by Medi-Cal or by insurance companies. But, you know, the insurance companies are really about the institutional medicine. So it's like been a little bit of a hard sell. And then it can be expensive, but it can also not be, right? There's in the Bay Area, there's some community doula organizations. The thing about doulas is like we really care about the pregnant people, right? We really care about the birthing people. It's unfortunate that in this society, we will pay people exorbitant amounts of money to do like all kinds of stuff. But then like the women's work of like caring for people, tending to people, it's like because we have such a heart for it, we'll do it for free.
Right.
And it doesn't always feel like something that people want to put money away for, right? So I'd say it really depends. New doulas can be like maybe $500, right? And you have to think you're not only paying for at least 2 prenatal visits, labor and birth, which can be long, especially if it's a first baby. Like, you know, I've 60-hour labors, 72-hour labors where I'm sleeping at the person's house, cooking food, not going home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I usually stay like 6 hours postpartum and then at least 2 postpartum visits. And that doesn't even include the amount of time that I'm on call, because once a person gets to 37 weeks, I'm not going to like go somewhere else. You know what I mean? I stay close to home. My phone is on all the time. You can call me anytime, day or night. I'll pick up. I'm ready to go, you know? And so when you do the math, even if you're charging like on the higher, there are people who charge a lot. Currently my rates for private clients are like sliding scale 1,800 to 2,300. And I do sliding scale too, so people can kind of choose. But when you do the math of how many hours, not including on call, I'm getting paid like
$5 an hour.
literally. Yeah. And so, you know, it can feel expensive when you hear that number, especially because people tend to think like, oh, doula care is like an extra thing. But we're really an essential service for folks. And I would love for, you know, Fati to even talk about what it was like to have a doula to support. But we really recommend to folks too, like, you know, if you want a doula or you want a midwife, it might not be covered by insurance, but you know what you can do is ask all those people that want to buy you cute baby Nike and like baby onesies and games and all this kind of stuff for the babies. Make a doula fund, make a midwife fund, right? Because
great idea.
Community, we have so much family. It's like if everyone put in $20, $50, whatever, you could really get that money. And the beautiful and amazing thing about pregnancy and birth is like that is the starting point for the baby's entire life, right? How the baby is cared for and grown affects that person's life and also the pregnant person, right?
That's really a great point of, you know, hey, whatever you need, I'm here. If you need anything, give me a call. Just let me know. You know what I mean? Those should get people in, you know, in their minds when you hear, hey, let me know how I can help. Here's what we can do. You know what I mean? I think that, and that actually is a really good point that sometimes people don't know how to help. You know what I mean? Like you've got a whole bunch of family and friends and, you know, PIs understand that there is everybody's your uncle, your auntie, your cousin, uh, your niece, you know what I mean? So, and not people want to, they want to help and they don't know how to help. And this would be an easy way to, help people, allow people to be part of the process. Not everybody can come over to your house. Not everybody can, you wouldn't want everybody over at your house, but the people that are saying, let me know how I can help, maybe that can ring a bell of, here's how you can do it. Because
Right.
I think there's like you said, it's setting the baby up how they're born and how they're cared for in the first moments of their life. It's like eating healthy. People talk about eating healthy being more expensive, but in the long run, when you take into account doctor's appointments and health and premiums and medicines and prescriptions and all those kind of things, in the long term, it's cheaper. But it's just hard to see that. It's hard to see that when you're trying to live check to check to check. It's hard to see that long term picture. But here's a great point. You got all kinds of family, friends. That's how
Yeah.
we can do it.
Yeah. Fati, how was it having, like Ruta was saying, having a doula during your pregnancy? What difference would you say, or how did it help actually?
I mean, it helped tremendously. Honestly, I don't think any birthing person should go through their pregnancy alone. I think that it's such a sensitive time, and it's such a, like, it can go so many different ways. Like, it depends on the mom's body, how the baby's doing. There could be complications, or some moms, they don't have any morning sickness, and some moms do. Like, I had a lot of morning sickness and I had to get medication for that. And that was scary to go through it's my first baby, and even though I have doula training and I know what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to take care of myself, what happens week by week, I get that. But I needed someone to talk to. I needed someone to tell me that everything's going to be okay and that these things are normal. These happen to a lot of women. I went through a lot of, not a lot, but a few pregnancy complications where I felt like I was the only one experiencing them, and I was scared. And that kind of scared feeling isn't good for the baby itself.
Right.
So you need someone here to talk to and to help you, and this like support group when you can't go to your family members, So
Yeah, I think that's so important. And you talking about, I don't like, when I was pregnant with one of my girls, I was so sick, and I had the worst morning sickness, and I thought, man, I'm the only one in the world that this is happening to. And then it wasn't until years later, after talking to other women who have had kids, they're like, oh yeah, I was sick too, and I had an IV in my arm, and because I couldn't eat, or I was like, man, that would have been so helpful to know during the time that I was pregnant. So I love that. And I love that you're talking about it, because there's so many women that their bodies are changing, and is this normal? And sometimes they're embarrassed to ask about, questions or things that are happening to your body that you're not sure of, and to have a doula there to answer your questions, or a midwife. So I love that service is available for women.
I think the more that this becomes a conversation, the more that it becomes more accepted. I think those are the kind of things that insurance eventually, because like, remember, there's chiropractors, those were never going to be covered by insurance. They're covered by insurance in most programs now. So I think as these become more accepted practices, the insurance, and apparently there already is some insurance that at least covers some of it. So that's kind of the foothold into getting that to be more accepted and more mainstream. Because the good thing about Pacific Islanders is, we love people, we'll do it for free. The bad thing about Pacific Islanders is we love people, we'll do it for free. Right? So that's the big piece of that is we have big hearts, so we're going to end up helping people. But we all started as volunteers, and the value that you ladies bring is needed, and it's needed to be understood that it doesn't have to be something like kind of off the beaten path kind of thing. I think the more that you ladies are bringing it to the forefront and you're talking about it, and sounds like that there's some mainstream acceptance. Other than in San Francisco, we're still working on it in the Bay Area. But hopefully that ends up being more accepted with the insurance companies, because that's how we'll end up moving the line with it if it's less expensive for the end user.
Yeah, and I think giving it should be an option
Yeah.
when women are finding out that they're pregnant and the care that they need. It should be listed as an option. I 100% believe that because of our mental health and the unknown that first time mothers are going through. There's so much unknown that sometimes you don't want to talk to your doctor, and to have someone that looks like you
Hmm.
and you are comfortable and seeing and asking questions. I think that's so important. I think the work that you both are doing is so needed in our community. And I I praise the work that you guys are doing. It's so needed, and I appreciate everything that Mana Pacifica stands for. One last question. The hour flew by. I'm so sorry. I want to keep talking and talking and talking, but what inspired you to get involved in this work, Ruta? And then I'll ask Fatih.
My best friend got pregnant. And, I've always grown up, being Afa Samoa, Afa Pae, right? And I grew up with my
Mm.
Samoan dad. I always kind of was aware of the way that he was treated weird, the way that, like, we as a family unit, he raised myself and my brother, that we were treated weird as a family unit. So I was always, even though maybe I wasn't necessarily catching the racist vibes because of how I could see that my dad was being treated differently, right? And so I've always just had this awareness. And then, honestly, birth wasn't that much on my radar. Like, I went to school for anthropology and archaeology, and I knew I was interested in culture. But my best friend got pregnant, and I found myself very quick to be like, oh, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this, just the way that every pregnant person experiences. Everyone has 2 cents and some opinion to give you unsolicited, right? And I didn't want to be that person. I wanted to actually be a support and a resource. So I was like, okay, hold up. And I started reading books, and I would get her the same book that I was getting so that we could talk and I could just be a support person. And someone told me, oh, that's called being a doula, right? So again, that's the thing where it's like, we just do this thing naturally, and now there's a name for it.
Right.
And so that was really my impetus. And as I read about, more about natural birth and out of hospital birth, I learned about the ways that people are coerced into doing things that they don't necessarily want to do in pregnancy, in birth, and postpartum. And that really lit a fire under me. So I was like, this is not fair, and it's having impact on everyone's lives for forever. And so that was it for me, really. And, to this day, it's like, I'm excited that we're all becoming doulas, but what I really want is for us as doulas and birth workers to be able to re-infuse our community with this knowledge that is not so far gone for us, so that we can turn to our sister, our auntie, our cousin, and that there is that knowledge there inside of our community. And then as professionals, we can work in our community, but then we can also hustle. And, being a doula is a great hustle outside of that, and go work in other communities, but really be able to bring that knowledge back to our folks.
That's awesome. What about you, Fatih?
Yeah, I actually saw a home birth when I was around 8 or 9 years old, and I had no idea what a midwife or a doula was. And, when I talked to my mom or my dad about it, they're like, oh, you got to go to med school. You got to be an OBGYN. That's the people who, only deliver babies, and it's only in the hospital. And so literally all the way up till I almost finished college. I mean, when I finished college, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to med school and I'm going to do all this. And I actually went to a kind of like a seminar, a med student for a day at UCSF, because that was one of the schools I wanted to apply to. And they did the whole rundown of what it's like to how to become a med student, like the process. And I was like, this is not really what I want to do. And then I saw that during like the lunch session, I saw that there was a midwife like kind of like table, and I was like, what is this? And they were like, oh, we also like deliver babies and do this, help the mom through their pregnancy. And I was like, what? And you guys are providers? Like, so it was really strange to finally, like, to think that just to go to med school, and that's how I was gonna help moms and pregnant women. And then knowing that there's midwives who provide this whole other type of care and provide natural birth care and delivery instead of like C-sections and whatnot. And then I looked into midwifery, and I learned people were talking about how they were a doula before they were a midwife. And that actually set the foundation of being a midwife and working in a hospital in the first place. And so I checked out what being a doula was, and I got into one of the training sessions, and I was like, this is exactly what I need and what the type of care I want to provide for people in my community and just people of color in general. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. You went to this road and it led you to the road that you're passionate about. I love that.
It's so, and here's a good example of how you don't know what your passion is necessarily. Like, society says you got to figure it out at 18, you go to college for 4 years, at 22, you're going to get out and you're going to, it's like, sometimes you don't figure out what your passion is. Some people don't figure out what their passion is. Right. And you can just see, like, when you talk to somebody that hasn't found it, they don't look like you two. So it's anthropology, it's amazing what we end up doing. And if I were to ask myself 10 years ago, what's your passion, it definitely wouldn't have said anything to do with PBD. I wouldn't have been able to come up with it. But it's amazing watching people like you both that are so engaged in what you're doing and having found your passion. It's inspiring.
Yeah. Mona said, thank you, Ruta and Fati. I hope we bring doula care to American Samoa. That would be so awesome. I think it's there. We just don't call it that, or just more structured. That would be awesome. Thank you, Mona, for checking in. Ladies, thank you so much for the amazing, great, needed information that you guys provided
on Labor Day.
On Labor Day, thank you so much for your time and the space and the energy that you brought. And of course, we have to have you on again because we didn't get everything out of you. We need more information, and it has to be a normal conversation so that this is a regular conversation, that it's part of the process of when you're expecting a baby.
Right. There's people that are going to see this, are going to go, wow, I didn't even know this kind of thing was out there.
Didn't even know. Ruta, Fati, thank you so much for today. Thank you for everything that you gave us. I appreciate your time and your space. We are here every Monday, right here on this page, PBD and YouTube. If you've missed any part of this interview, we're here. You can go back after we're done here and replay anything that you've missed. A lot of great information. Please go follow M.ANA Pacifica on Instagram and follow Ruta on Facebook and everything. Get all your information. We usually post a lot of M.ANA Pacifica's flyers. And so reach out if you need any other information. Thank you so much, ladies, for your time. We love you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.